Welcome, everybody. I'm James here with the Political Insider. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Sean Spicer.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. You guys all know him, former press secretary for the Trump administration. He's joined us today to talk about his new book, The Briefing. Sean, you've been all over the country. You've been promoting the book.
True.
You just said you were out late last night in another state promoting it. He's everywhere, and you guys should definitely check out the book. So, let's start with the book.
Okay.
Why did you write it? There's a lot of memoirs coming out of people who've been in the White House. I mean, the Trump White House is very exciting. There's a lot of palace intrigue, that kind of thing. Why did you write it? What sets it apart from other people's stories?
It's a great question. I mean, there's two main reasons. When I left the White House, James, that wasn't my goal. I wasn't going to write a book. I turned down a few offers or meetings even just to talk about it because I didn't think that was my goal. What I found in going around the country the first 2.5 months that I left was that the same questions kept coming up over and over again, primarily in two areas. One, people asked me about my journey, my career, how I got there, how I felt about things. They had read something in an article that I felt some way or that I did this. And second is I started to realize through these same conversations how much of history was going to get lost if I didn't document what had happened during the campaign, the convention, etc. And I'm the first person that was there, from the convention, the campaign, the transition to the White House. And so I have a very unique role to be able to explain to people some of the things that are going on behind the scenes that they might not otherwise know. And that's part of it was just to share that experience.
Awesome. Yeah, it was a pretty incredible thing. You mentioned in the book, you talk about how a lot of people, they doubted Trump from the beginning. They said he'd never, he wouldn't actually run for president, first of all. He would never submit the paperwork to run. He would never have a chance in the primaries. And as this whole process goes along, what was your take from it from the beginning when Trump, famously went down the escalator?
Well, look, if you've been involved in campaigns and are like a political junkie, you look at the structure that's part of a campaign. He had none of it.
Right.
And just purely on an analytical standpoint, you realize how different this was going to be, and you kind of wondered where it would go. I joke to people all the time, like, imagine if an NFL team this season said, we're going to play the entire season focused on just field goals.
Right.
And you go, you can't win. You can't. That's just not right. And yet, at the end of the season, you saw this team rack up these wins and go to the Super Bowl. You go, holy smokes. That's kind of how I view Trump. Is that every time that someone said no, he overcame it, and you had to wonder, was this the new norm? Is this completely unique? And it was fascinating because time again. He would do something that was so out of the norm of what was supposed to be done and get elevated or succeed. And that's what made it truly unique.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about a little bit of your time at the White House. What I found really interesting in the book is basically you hit the ground running because you have no choice. This is right after inauguration. And I really want to bring up this topic you talk about is the MLK bust scenario. Where right after inauguration, I believe even the same day.
No, it's the same day. That evening, 5, 6 o'clock.
Yeah, which is crazy. So Zeke Miller, famous reporter, he tweets out that the MLK...
Well, no, he doesn't tweet out. So if you basically, the president, gives his speech, he gets sworn in, he goes down to the White House, and the president believes that, we need to show the American people right off the bat that he's doing exactly what he said. He's getting things done. And so he's like, look, he's starting to sign all these executive orders and actions. We bring the entire, what they call the press pool in, which is a representative group of reporters, because obviously they all can't fit in the Oval Office, but they create this rotating group of reporters that will cover events, and then they write what they call a pool report, which is what they share with everyone to say, hey, since you couldn't be in the room, here's what happened, here's where everyone was, here's who else was in the room, here's what the meaningful part of what happened. And they share that with everyone else who's part of the White House press corps who couldn't be in the room. And this reporter writes this pool report that says the bust of Martin Luther King has been removed from the White House. Now, immediately, that goes to every reporter that then now tweets it out, then puts it out. That's what started it. It wasn't just, it went like wildfire everywhere. Reince Priebus, who's the chief of staff, once this gets out, we've gone back to our office thinking, okay, that's great. What a way to kick it off. The president's working, and here's what he did, and okay, let's get ready for the balls, and let's go out. And it's like everyone's now in panic mode. Like, we need to go back, take a picture. Holy smokes, it didn't get removed. It wasn't there. Not to mention the fact that, there was no attempt to actually figure out what was going on. It was just like, get it in the report, tweet it out, get it out.
Right.
And that then began a firestorm and we're trying to put the genie back in the bottle. We took a picture of the bus.
Yeah.
We're gunning it out. And the point why what you brought up is so important is understanding the mindset and the mentality.
Yeah.
From day one, it was like, are you kidding me? We're under attack.
Under siege.
And all they want to talk about is the transgressions of the White House, never actually their own. And the thing is, if you think about that in context, how... And again, that just negates everything that happened in the campaign and the transition. There's this disposition to be negative, to find what's wrong. And if you think about that one event, you walk into a room and you see all these people in there. I think Reince Priebus was in there, Don McGahn, the council, all these other people around the president as he's signing these executive orders. And what's the reporter doing? Not focusing on who's there and what's happening to share with their colleagues, but looking around the room to figure out how can we get you on something. That's the mentality.
Yeah, it's not a very journalistic mentality.
No, it's a gotcha mentality.
Yeah. So, talking about the media, it starts from the get-go, this kind of like antagonistic relationship. They basically start. I think you say in the book, from the beginning, that kind of set the tone for how it was going to be, how you would have to deal with it.
I mean, I think we realized that as much as we would have started off and kind of do a reset from the campaign, it wasn't going to happen. That there was a gotcha mentality from the beginning.
Okay, so in the book you talk a lot about, you name names of journalists and you kind of like do a little score settling and stuff like that. Is that kind of what some of the reason behind the book as well?
No, I think what it was is, I think for most people, they see a lot of things. Like so they read a story, they see something on television or on YouTube, or they watch the briefing or whatever, and there's so much more that goes beyond the scenes. What I want to do is tuck people into some of these people that they've read about or they see about or they hear about, and explain to them the relationships that exist, the interactions that happen, so that they can better understand what it's like.
Right. So I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the most popular topic in the news, Miss Omarosa, who's going around everywhere. She's entered into the lexicon of having the single name like Cher. Omarosa. She, everybody knows her. What is your take on her? I know you've said a few things on Twitter and the like. You've commented a little bit. What is your take on her? Is she...
Well, look, I think she is someone who is frankly indebted to President Trump for what he's done for her career. He's given her opportunity after opportunity to work at some senior levels to participate in this process. She's praised him very publicly, and I think that's interesting that, a few months ago she leaves the White House, she does all these interviews and talk about what a great man he is, how proud she was to work for him, the amazing accomplishments, and then within what has to be weeks, if not days, she's meeting with publishers saying, hey, if you can get me some money, I'll say anything you want. That shows to me a lack of trustworthiness, a lack of integrity, and then to see what she's been doing in terms of some of this taping stuff, especially in classified settings, to me is frankly just reprehensible.
Yeah, it's weird because, the media, like you said, has this gotcha mentality, and they want any kind of fodder or whatever to go off of.
Right.
But even when Omarosa leaks the John Kelly firing tape, even some people who are normally antagonistic towards the president were like, that's a little too far.
I don't know that they were that. I mean, here's the funny thing.
Yeah.
When you look at the image, the first interview she did on Meet the Press, that was feckless at best. I mean, Chuck Todd wished her well and said, good luck. I mean, it was sort of, as long as you're going to say something against Donald Trump that's negative, we'll have you on the show.
Okay, yeah. Wow.
And zero follow-up.
Yeah.
I mean, what they let someone get away with, who they refused to have on the show months earlier, is amazing. Yeah. I mean, these folks never asked for her. They never thought of her as credible or an expert in any area, and suddenly now they're flipping over her to get her on because she's saying negative things. I mean, that tells you all you need to know.
Yeah. So what do you think about her going around saying that there's this recording of Trump saying that racial epithet?
Well, here's my theory on this. If there's such a recording, where is it? Because I guarantee you, in terms of, you look at what came out in the cycle, you had the Access Hollywood tape, all these other things. And so suddenly this most damaging one never comes up. And she's provided zero evidence. In fact, during her book, while she was writing it, she failed to come up with it. Right. I think that there's a big contrast between the kind of book that I wrote and the kind of book that she wrote. Right. She was trying to figure out how she can sell books by saying negative things against people. I think what I try to do is people give a genuine insight into what was happening. And if you're interested in politics or just generally what's been happening, I think there's a big difference. It's not like she was ever in the room for big decisions. So if you want to read some negative lines about a couple people, that's one thing. I think if you want to understand how everything kind of evolved over the last 2 years, my book gives a much better account of what's going on. Or not even a better, it's an account of it. Hers does not have any basis in actually what was going on.
Okay, cool. Since you've left the White House, you've been going around the book tour and doing some other things. I want to ask about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, your successor. She has a little bit of a different style than you.
She does.
She's a little more combative. What's your take on that? Do you think she's doing a good job in that front? The press seems to have gotten a little. I don't know if it's gotten harder on the administration, but they're certainly.
Well,
like
every
sharks.
one of those studies, right?
Yeah.
The MR Media Research Center did a study that 92% of the coverage against the president is negative. Harvard put one out, and Pew Research put one out that all kind of track in that ballpark. I think there's no question every press secretary is going to have a little bit of their own style, and Sarah clearly has hers. For me, I think I talk about in the book that I became the story too often. And if you're a press secretary, that's not a good place to be.
Yeah.
Sarah, I think, right off the bat, partly because I think she saw it, partly just because she's a very talented woman, realized that she needed to keep the focus on the president and his agenda, and I think she did that and has continued to do that.
Yeah.
Much,
go ahead. Sorry.
No. I think it's very effectively.
Yeah. So you think she got a lot of? She got a preview of what was to come, given how you had to perform.
Sure. Look, anytime you get to go second, you get to watch what happens first, and obviously not just that, but it wasn't like she just watched. We worked hand in hand every single day. She is a trusted friend and confident and a true professional and someone who. So I think for me it was I leaned on her a lot at key times.
Yeah. So speaking of Ms. Sanders. She, there was an incident about a month or so ago of getting harassed at that restaurant. She was asked to leave.
Yeah.
We've seen Betsy DeVos, Secretary of Education, get harassed. There's a lot of harassment going on of Trump administration officials. Have you faced any of that since?
Well, I talk about a couple of the instances in the book. There was one in an Apple store that kind of went viral, where I haven't been asked to leave a restaurant like Sarah. I think Betsy had an incident, but it has gotten to be more commonplace. And sadly more acceptable. Right? So you saw Maxine Waters' comments. She talks about pushing back and surrounding people. I don't know that that's really what, if that's, I just don't think that that's a good place for society, whether it's legal or not, or constitutional. Obviously we all have a right to protest and to express ourselves. But if that's really what we should be doing, is getting it closer and closer to violence. Sarah's the first White House press secretary to ever have a White House, Secret Service detail.
Right, yeah.
And that to me is not a good sign. When you're having to put protective people on someone because there's an active threat to your life, I think that's a sad place. And I think, frankly, for all the concern that there is about the media, I think there should be equal concern about government officials and others, just even in the public, who are worried for their safety.
Yeah. So, in that same vein, you see congressional Republicans, this has been going on since you were in the White House. They've been investigating all the kinds of, the whole dossier, Fusion GPS, that whole situation where you have people in the government who are, talking about taking down Trump and that kind of thing during the campaign. What is your whole take on that? Because it's such a complicated thing, and congressional Republicans have only brought out so much, and they're getting a lot of pushback from congressional Democrats. What is your whole take on that whole thing, the whole dossier, Fusion GPS?
Well, I think to your point, we've been talking about this now for 18 months. There's a difference between meddling and collusion. I think that we've seen Russia and others try to meddle and undermine the integrity of our voting systems. We need to be very clear on that kind of stuff, that we need to push back against it. We need to strengthen our own voting, and we need to call out any bad actor, whether it's a state actor or some kind of third party that is trying to meddle in our election, that is unacceptable, that we will push back, we will prosecute, and I think Mueller has done that with a lot of the Russians. There's a vast difference between that and any sense of collusion, which in 18 plus months we've seen nothing on. And I think that we need to be very careful about making sure that we separate those two things, and as soon as possible ruling out this whole collusion thing, because we're now 18 months in. I also think that it is fascinating that it's been so one-sided. Where is the DNC? Where is Podesta? Where's all the Hillary stuff? There's got to be an equal look at their side. There was sort of it was interesting during the campaign, there was a lot of concern about their relationship with Russia, their dealings with Russia, and suddenly after the campaign, the focus is on the opposite. I get that they all thought she was going to win, but I think if we're really interested in rooting out some of this meddling and concerned about some of these relationships, then Mueller hopefully will look at a lot more than just the one side.
Do you think Mueller's getting close to wrapping this thing up? I know a lot of our...
I don't know, but I hope he does, because it's like, at what point you seem to have interviewed everybody that you want. You either have some evidence or support for what you're doing, or you don't. And I think at some point you got to put your cards on the table, especially as we head up close to a midterm.
Yes. So I also want to get your thoughts on that. Coming up November 2018, obviously everybody knows the midterms. There's a lot at stake here. There's a lot of talk about impeachment of the president. Democrats are supposedly riding on this blue wave. What do you see happening in 2018 for the midterms?
I think the Senate is in pretty good hands. We've got technically a one-seat majority with Senator McCain right now, but you've got a lot of these, what they call, Democrats in red states where Trump has won handily, whether it's Donnelly in Indiana, Manchin, Heitkamp, McCaskill. There's a lot of places for us to. We're doing unbelievably well in Florida. Rick Scott is up on Senator Nelson. So I think that there's a lot of areas to actually pick up seats because of the landscape and who's in cycle at this time in the Senate. The House clearly concerns me. The Democrats need 23 seats by average since the 50s. They've picked up, the party of out of power has picked up just over 30. We've got 60 plus members of Congress on the Republican side retiring, which makes those open seats. And it's a vastly different thing when you have an incumbent who's got name recognition and a degree of accomplishment. That makes it a lot safer because it's harder to take on somebody that everyone knows and everyone knows is a results-oriented person. So I'm clearly concerned. I think the one thing saving us is the strength of the economy and the improving job market. But if that seems to falter, we're going to be in big trouble. And I think that the House is hardly a foregone conclusion. But the one piece that I think you're right on and that people have to understand is that for all the people who maybe have generally sat out a midterm or don't have the same enthusiasm as the general election, they need to understand that, you brought up the word impeachment. I mean, there is going to be investigation after investigation. That's all the Democrats will focus on in the House. They will do everything they can to interview every single person in Trump world and do nothing else. There won't be post office's name. There won't be I mean, it'll come to a screeching halt. And beyond that piece of it, it also slows the agenda down. You're not talking anymore about tax cuts. You're not talking about any more of the agenda that has gotten this economy where it is. That should make sure that everyone understands the binary choice that exists. It's not just candidate A versus candidate B. It's all of these policies, and the Trump agenda is on the ballot.
Do you think that's the most potent argument Republicans?
I do. I think that people have to understand, because too often when you talk to someone about elections, they say, I don't know. I don't know either of the candidates, or I like so-and-so. And it's like, it's not about the person, this election. It's about the policies. And whether or not you want them to go forward or not, whether or not you want Nancy Pelosi to be the speaker or not. That's what it comes down to. It is that set of agenda items or not. And if you're a liberal and you say, great, I want that, but understand it's not about candidate A or candidate B. It is about maintaining a majority.
So you're a political junkie. I really want to get your take on this. It seems like there's a civil war in the Democrat Party. You have the socialist Bernie Sanders wing going out with the more establishment wing. Nancy Pelosi,
The irony is that Nancy Pelosi is considered the establishment of San Francisco. I mean, that's the sort of the irony of that.
So the civil war going on is kind of reminiscent of like 2010 Republican Tea Party thing going on with the establishment. Do you think that that's going to play a huge factor in the election this time?
I think if they don't get a handle on it, it's a great question, because there's always churn for the party out of power. You had Occupy Wall Street, Code Pink, we had our Tea Party. I mean, that's just, there's a restlessness when you're out of power. The question is, they seem to be embracing it, and the center of the party continues to go further and further to the left, and this progressive socialist wing becomes now the standard bearer. That's what I think is interesting, is that they are now, the folks that are in the middle or are on the the middle left are trying to figure out how to use the same language and tactics, and they're free everything. And that's where I think that the Democrats, look, it might be a short-term play, but I think this is not good for the long-term viability of their party. Not that I'm looking
not that you're looking to give them any tips. So hypothetically, Democrats take back the House, do they make Pelosi Speaker? Or do you think they're going to go for someone
That's
different?
a fascinating question because you have 50 Democrats on record. The issue is, I think that what the two-step that I think most of these folks who say they won't vote for are going to claim is that they will vote. They will not. She will not be opposed seriously in the caucus. So they'll say, well, we didn't vote for it. Well, you can abstain because then you only need a majority of their caucus. Once it's a binary choice, Nancy Pelosi versus whoever the Republican choice is, then they'll say, well, I voted for it, but only because. I mean, I guarantee you, they're already figuring out their two-step out of these pledges not to vote. But these 50 Democrats that say they won't vote for her, they're going to find a way. That's what they do.
Okay. On the other side, I know you might not want to pick favorites, but the Republican speaker race, Jim Jordan jumped in, ardent conservative guy, former House Freedom Caucus chair. You have Steve Scalise's name in there, Kevin McCarthy. If Republicans keep the House with Paul Ryan retiring, who do you think would be the speaker there?
It's hard to answer that question because it is sort of an inside baseball. You have to know about the relationships that people have. How long have they known? Have they been working out buddies for a while?
Yeah.
Did they, and I don't know those things. I mean, that's when you have a 3-person race, and that's the other thing is you don't know. Is it McCarthy versus Jordan? Does Scalise jump in? Is there another person that jumps in? Until you see the ballot, it's really hard to handicap a race like that because I think each one of them has a constituency that could propel them to be the next speaker.
Awesome. Yeah, I just want to get your thoughts on the politics of 2018. Besides Omarosa, 2018 is driving a lot of the conversation on our site. A lot of our readers are concerned about where things are going poll-wise and election-wise. So thanks again. I want to ask a little more about the book. The best part I found in the book is you provide a lot of great anecdotes about the president. And I mean, our people love him. I'm fascinated by the guy. One of my favorite anecdotes you bring up is St. Patrick's Day. He lacked the green tie at the time.
He's not remember, he had just kind of quasi moved down from New York. So
right.
First Lady and Barron were still up there. They hadn't brought anything down. And right around St. Patrick's Day, the Irish Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, comes over. And they have this traditional thing that started during Reagan where they give out shamrocks, etc.
Yeah.
And I said to the president, I called in the resident and said, do you have a green tie? Because that's obviously the tradition. And he said, I'm sure I do. And I said, well, do you have one here? Because there's a difference between having one in New York, and it's not like the president's going to run down the street to Macy's.
Right.
And so he said, I'll look around, I'll call you in the morning. I'm thinking to myself, what is he going to rummage through the closet and say, hey, did Obama leave a tie? And so I called him again in the morning. I brought an extra one. And he said, I haven't really looked that hard. I'll look around, but just leave one on the desk. So I walk into the Oval Office, and there I am putting this green tie that I had brought from home on the Resolute desk. And for me, I grew up a very working class kid and never got a tour of the White House, never been in it. And here I am leaving a tie on the Resolute desk in the Oval Office of the White House for the President of the United States, a billionaire who has his own clothing line. And it just was one of those truly surreal moments to me.
And you mentioned at the close of the anecdote, you never got the tie back.
No. I mean, it's difficult to walk up to the president and go, excuse me, where's the tie? Where's the tie? So, but it was fascinating to watch him put it on. I mean, to see it on television, go, I have this tie, and he's wearing a tie for me.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of our readers and viewers are most interested in, what is President Trump like behind the scenes? The guy has been in the media spotlight for 30 odd years or so, and he has this image that he wants to put out there. You have the media with this negative imagery of him. What's he like behind? I mean, you've worked with him.
I think what you see is what you get for the most part. There is a wide range. I mean, he can be caring and empathetic. He can be, he can when things aren't going well, he can definitely express his. I mean, I think I've always said that with Trump, you always know where you stand.
Okay.
There's been times when he's been, rolling out the accolades. That was amazing. That was awesome. And there's times when it's just like, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
But he, you see it on television, and it's sort of that's kind of how he is in person.
Really? Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I've gathered, that he is a straight shooter basically, and he's very candid when he wants to be, and it's awesome. Again, guys, want to pick up the briefing? Sean Spicer, go to his website, check out his book tour if he's come to a city near you. The book is great. There's a lot of great. Like I said, the whole thing is peppered with great anecdotes about the president and cool things you don't get to really see. You correct the record a lot. You give a lot of your background and how you got to where you got to, and it's awesome to see. So, what's next for you then?
We're gonna obviously, as you mentioned, we're gonna be on If you go to SeanSpicer.com, it's got places to order the book, but it tells you where we're going around the country. We've sold the book in Ireland, UK, Australia, New Zealand, so we've got some opportunities to go abroad to talk about it. But I've got a consulting firm where I advise some clients. I've got a podcast called Everything's Going to Be All Right with Katie Pavlich from Town Hall.
Yeah.
And then we're working on a bunch of projects on the side. So it's been a lot of fun. And it's just been, it's everyone goes, have you slowed down since you left the White House? And I've actually probably been busier, travel-wise and project-wise, just less intense.
Yeah,
I don't have to worry about that late-night phone call.
Right. Anything getting back into politics? And I mean, you were.
I'm with America First Super PAC
that
supports the president and his policies, and do a lot with them.
Okay.
Advocating for what we're doing out there at America First. And that's as close as I want to get. I love the connection.
Yeah.
We're out there advocating, but it's not on a day-to-day basis.
Right. A little more freedom. From
more freedom. You
from
bet.
the West Wing. But yeah, thanks again for joining us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
One more question.
Yeah.
A colleague asked me to ask you a little more on the lighter side. Dippin' Dots. Apparently, you have a strange.
You're the first one who's brought that up.
Okay.
Which is so. The funny thing is, I have a chapter in the book, chapter 9, called Memes and Memories. Right, and no matter what I did, every day I woke up and there'd be something. And then I'll probably get this wrong, but it was like 2005 or 2007. We were at a Nationals game with a buddy of mine, and I tweeted out their slogan used to be the ice cream of the future.
Yeah.
And so I tweeted out because you know how we've been going like 3 or 4 years, and I was like, when are they going to stop the ice cream of the future?
Yeah.
And it was I tweeted silly stuff back then. 10 years ago, and someone started reviving these tweets, and Dippin' Dots had made a big deal out of it when I got named about, and I was like, oh my goodness, it was a silly tweet from 2005 or 6 or whatever it was.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I used to.
They stopped using the slogan though.
I didn't realize that. So
well, it doesn't say ice cream of the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. I worked at a theme park from high school to college. I ran plenty of Dippin' Dot stands.
Really?
That was always really funny, and that was like 15 years ago.
See?
And it's still the future.
And now the future.
Now it's ice cream of today.
Right, exactly.
Well, anyway, thanks again for joining
James.
us. We appreciate it, and hope you guys check out the book, The Briefing, SeanSpicer.com. Check out where you can buy it, local bookstore. Check out where he's going on a book tour if he's coming to a city near you. Thanks again, Sean.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yes.